Raj, I was just telling Wally, how jealous I was when I'm sitting in the coach's room and I'm hearing Jeff Hamilton and Marty St. Louis talking about these great little private phone calls now with Roger Grillo. And I said, how am I not invited to these calls? But I think, Roger, I think that's one of the reasons, I think being on this call, from the perspective of buy-in and the right people with the messaging, and then seeing the success, maybe you could talk a little bit about, when you're having, what Marty St. Louis done and Jeff Hamilton's done with their teams, and they're doing it. And from an outsider's point of view, I always thought, oh, they're just compiling. They're just finding the best kids and putting them on their team. And then when you're there and you're watching the inner workings of how they work, I mean, every Monday night, Marty St. Louis on the ice with 3 teams in 6 or 7 stations, running small area games and jumping in and teaching. And there's no breakouts. There's no controlled, zone entries. It's all about, using these concepts that obviously he's bought into. And maybe you could talk a little bit about, how what you guys discuss from a professional level guy who's now implementing those at the lowest levels of the game, right, at the youth level, and then finding success with that.
Well, I think the greatest attribute, as I mentioned earlier, of people who are really good at what they do is that they don't believe they know everything. And the beauty of Marty is that he's a consummate question asker. I mean, I'm on the phone with Marty at least 3 or 4 times a day, and it could be just talking about a game we both watched last night. It could be a game that his kids played in that I watched, and he wants some feedback. I talked to him after every game of his 14-year career. It might not have been right after the game. It could have been on the bus. It could have been on the plane. It could have been the next morning. I'm coaching my own team, and then I'm, watching his games. But it was a thrill. It was a joy, because the beauty of Marty is he's always wanted to get better. And as a coach, he's the same way. And you see it, Mike. The way those teams play that he's coaching. I mean, if you took a video of the right way to play hockey, I watched Lucas play last night, prep school game, and if you watched those teams that he's been involved with down there, in the belly of the beast, as you know, as far as some things that could go the wrong way, just because of the amount of money and the craziness. But what he's been able to do is manage some of the craziness, but the product on the ice is so fun to watch, and it's exactly what we want with. I mean, before we put in the rule about not being able to ice a puck on a penalty kill, Marty wouldn't let his kids ice the puck on a penalty kill. He was ahead of that. He was forcing that because he wanted kids to make plays. He wanted kids to make reads. He wanted kids to play with possession. He knew that that's where the game was going. He played in it. He was that. And so he really is constantly pushing the envelope on wanting to get better. So we have constant discussions in little groups and a lot of NHL, former NHL, a ton of European players. We had a group with Frölunda during COVID, all the Frölunda coaches, and then myself and Marty and Bill Beanie and a bunch of college coaches over here. There's probably 15 of us. Then we would once a week just talk hockey and talk about what's happening in player development. And it's just you're constantly trying to pick up new stuff because it's ever evolving. And once you think you know it and somebody else does something, and you're like, what the heck was that? And so to be on top of the wave instead of, it's like I said earlier about a player working early. We as coaches, we need to work early. We need to constantly try to evolve our philosophy and thoughts because the game is constantly changing. I watched our women's team play this morning, and the evolution of the game on that side is just amazing. It's just so fun to watch. I watched it with great teams when I was at Brown. They had phenomenal teams, and I used to watch that. But where they're at now, it's just the puck movement, the possession, the reads, the athleticism. It's so fun to watch, and I think we as coaches and administrators and leaders have to constantly be there. But I think when we have people when we have Hall of Famers who are doing it right and doing it well, the impact is great. Because when we have Hall of Famers that don't do it right and do it great, then the impact's not so great.